What if the most feared weapon in the galaxy, the Death Star, had been commanded not by the cold arrogance of Grand Moff Tarkin, but by the calculated brilliance of Grand Admiral Thrawn? What if this master tactician, who understood his enemies better than they understood themselves, was the one deciding when and if the superweapon would be fired? Would Alderaan still stand? Would the rebellion even understand the danger they faced? Or would Thrawn's foresight make him the single most dangerous figure in galactic history? It had been 3 years since the battle for Lothal. 3 years since Grand Admiral Thrawn's meticulously laid campaign dismantled the Phoenix Cell, a rebel network that had plagued the Empire far longer than expected. Unlike the blunt, scorched earth tactics of many Imperial commanders, Thrawn's victory had been as much psychological as military. He dissected the rebels through their own culture, studying Lothal's art, architecture, and history to anticipate their movements. When the final strike came, it wasn't just overwhelming firepower that crushed the Phoenix Cell, it was inevitability. In the wake of that triumph, Thrawn's influence in the Imperial hierarchy soared. While many Moffs and Admirals resented the alien Chiss, his results could not be denied. Even the Emperor himself spoke of Thrawn as one of his most effective instruments. But in the corridors of Coruscant's Imperial Palace, another name carried equal weight: Grand Moff Tarkin. Where Thrawn was deliberate and calculating, Tarkin was ruthless and pragmatic. Both had the Emperor's air, both commanded fear and respect, and now their paths were about to converge. Thrawn's rise had not dulled his obsession with intelligence gathering. He had been watching the flow of Imperial resources with a mind that could see patterns invisible to most. Dozens of sectors, from the outer rim to the deep core, showed irregularities in supply shipments, materials vanishing from records, and crew assignments redirected under vague security mandates. Thrawn did not believe in coincidences. What he saw in those figures was a gravitational pull. Thousands of disparate actions, all orbiting something massive. When the pattern became undeniable, he requested a private audience with Emperor Palpatine. In the dim throne room, with the Emperor's shadowed face barely visible beneath his hood, Thrawn laid out his findings. The scale is vast, Your Majesty. The concentration of Kyber crystal shipments alone, whatever it is, it could power a fleet, or destroy one. The Emperor's yellow eyes gleamed. You are correct, Grand Admiral. There is such a project, one that will reshape the galaxy. When Thrawn pressed for details, Palpatine smiled faintly. Not a gesture of warmth, but of amusement. Very well, you will see it, and you will command it, alongside Grand Moff Tarkin. The first time Thrawn saw the Death Star, it hung in space like an artificial moon, a marvel of engineering, an obscenity of purpose. He understood immediately why the project had been kept secret for so long. Its size alone could shatter the morale of any enemy fleet. But his admiration for the design did not blind him to the truth. This was not a tool of precision. It was a weapon of terror. That truth put him in immediate philosophical conflict with Tarkin. Tarkin believed fear of the station's power was the surest way to keep systems in line. To him, mass destruction was not only justified, it was necessary. A single devastating example to keep the rest of the galaxy obedient. Alderaan, Jedha, Scarif, to Tarkin, they were just names on a list, waiting to be struck true. Thrawn's view was different. He valued civilian stability, understanding that indiscriminate slaughter only bred resistance. Destroy a city, and you destroy not just lives, but culture, the very thing Thrawn used to predict and control his enemies. More than once, the command deck of the Death Star became the stage for tense exchange. The galaxy must understand there is no rebellion without consequence, shouts Tarkin. Fear is a crude motivator, Grand Moff. People who live in fear learn to fight without it. Then we simply remind them again. And in doing so, you plant the seeds of the next war. The Emperor, for his part, allowed the friction. He seemed to enjoy watching them circle each other, testing the limits of their philosophies. When the Tantive 4 was intercepted, and Prince Leia Organa taken prisoner, Tarkin saw only an interrogation. Thrawn saw an opportunity. He requested access to the Death Star's extensive archives and studied Alderaanian art, architecture, and royal symbology. Through brushstrokes and sculpture, he read the mind of a people, and through them, the princess herself. He saw defiance in the clean lines of their portraits, duty in the recurring motifs of mountain peaks and skies. Leia would rather die than betray the rebellion. This knowledge led him to a quiet decision. There was no point in forcing her hand. Instead, he orchestrated her escape, allowing the Millennium Falcon to flee with its precious passenger, unaware that in doing so, they had confirmed the location of the rebel base. The data pointed to Yavin 4, a remote jungle moon with minimal civilian population. It was nonetheless the central hub of the rebel alliance. Destroy it, and the rebellion would lose its heart, its leadership, and its ability to coordinate galaxy-wide resistance. For Thrawn, the destruction of Yavin was a necessary evil, the only time he would unleash the Death Star super laser on a world. His calculations reduced the approach time by nearly half compared to Tarkin's trajectory. Every hyperspace jump was plotted to shave minutes from the countdown. By the time the rebel scouts realized the Death Star was in motion, it was already too late. The alarms in the rebel base on Yavin 4 echoed through the ancient temples as panic spread like wildfire. Mechanics shouted orders, droids scrambled, and pilots raced to their ships. The jungle moon trembled under the weight of desperation. High above, a shadow eclipsed the stars. The Death Star had arrived, but something was wrong. The base's tactical officers whispered in disbelief. The timing was impossible. Every Imperial officer they had studied, every Imperial model they had simulated, suggested they should have had hours before the station could maneuver into range. Yet here it was, already preparing its firing sequence. Thrawn's calculations had sliced the window. The rebels hadn't planned for this. They weren't ready. Luke Skywalker sat in the cockpit of his X-Wing, trying to steady his breathing. The comm channels buzzed with frantic chatter. Red Squadron calling in, Gold Squadron checking coordinates, ground crew shouting last-second updates. Wedge's voice cut through the noise. Stay sharp. We can do this. We have to do this. but Luke could hear the cracks in his friend's voice. They all could. The pilots knew the truth. This wasn't just another battle. If they failed, it wasn't ships or soldiers that would be lost. It was everyone. The first wave dove into the trench, the narrow walls rushing past them. Laser fire raked across the surface as TIE fighters screamed in pursuit. Luke's hands tightened on the controls. He had never flown in combat before. He tried to focus, to remember Ben's words, to reach for that calm place inside him. But every second was drowned by the pounding thought, if I fail, they all die. Gold Leader went in first. His Y-wing shuddered under the strain of enemy fire. He released his proton torpedoes. The missiles streaked toward the port and detonated harmlessly against a shimmering barrier. A gasp tore through Rebel comms. "It's shielded!" Gold 2 shouted. "The exhaust port is shielded!" In the command center, Leia's stomach dropped. The weakness Galen Erso had hidden in the design. Their only hope was gone. Thrawn had been waiting for them. Back in the trench, panic took hold. Pilots broke formation, scattering under the relentless pursuit of TIE fighters. More torpedoes were fired, but every shot met the same fate. Stopped cold by the invisible wall of energy protecting the port. Luke's heart sank as he heard the screams of dying pilots through his headset. Red 6 was hit. Gold 5 spiraled out of control, his final words cut off by static. Each explosion was another nail in the coffin of hope. "This isn't working," Wedge yelled. "We can't do it. We can't." But they still fought on, because what else was there? On board the Death Star, the crew moved with eerie calm. Where the rebels were frantic, the Imperials were precise, efficient, guided by Thrawn's cold orders. The super laser array aligned, beams converging toward the reactor. On the command deck, officers recited the countdown. Super laser charging. 30 seconds until full power. Thrawn stood at the viewport, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on Yavin below. He gave no smile, no gesture of triumph. To him, this was not victory. This was necessity. Tarkin, standing just a few feet away, almost sneered at the restraint. "We are more alike than you thought, Grand Admiral," he muttered. Thrawn did not respond. Luke and Wedge regrouped for one last run. R2 chirped anxiously behind Luke, the astromech's dome spinning in agitation. "Just a little longer," Luke whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. "Just a little longer, please." The targeting computer flickered in front of him. He lined up the shot, his thumb hovering over the trigger. The torpedoes streaked down, sparks lighting the trench. For one heartbeat, Luke thought maybe, just maybe. The blast flared against the ray shield, harmless as fireworks. Luke's scream of frustration tore through the cockpit. "No! No, it's not working!" On the comm, Wedge's voice broke. "They've got us. We're finished." Super laser fully charged. Target locked. Fire. The green beam erupted from the Death Star, converging into a single lance of light that ripped across the void. In the Rebel command center, Leia felt the ground shake. The walls of the ancient temple groaned as if the planet itself cried out. She closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer for those who could not escape. Outside the jungle moon of Yavin 4 blossomed into a blinding sphere of fire. The forests, the temples, the rivers, everything was consumed in an instant. The shockwave tore through the rebel fleet, obliterating ships too slow to escape. Luke's X-Wing shuddered violently as he pulled hard away from the fireball, his eyes wide with horror. Behind him, R2 shrieked as the flames licked the edges of their shields. Yavin. It's gone, Luke whispered, his voice hollow. A handful of ships had managed to jump to hyperspace at the last possible second. Leia, aboard a blockade runner, Admiral Akbar's cruiser, Hera Syndulla's ship carrying a few scattered survivors. But it was not victory they carried with them into the stars. It was grief. The rebellion was shattered, its leaders dead, its fighters scattered, its morale broken beyond recognition. For the first time, Luke Skywalker, farm boy turned pilot, felt the crushing weight of failure. Not just his own, but the failure of an entire galaxy. And deep in the cold corridors of the Death Star, Thrawn quietly ordered the recordings of the battle delivered to his personal chamber. One pilot's style stood apart, instinctive yet precise, improvisational yet guided by something deeper. Cross-referencing the flight data with Imperial records, Thrawn's eyes narrowed. The patterns matched perfectly with those of a pilot from the Clone Wars. Anakin Skywalker. So, Thrawn murmured in his private chamber, the son lives. I hope you enjoyed this what-if theory of what if Thrawn was in charge of the Death Star. If you enjoyed it and would like a part 2, please comment part 2 below. Otherwise, let me know what if theories you would like to see. Thanks for watching.